Hello, welcome to the podcast AnonX. Today we're plunging into a story that, well, it shockingly blurs the lines between a chilling internet myth and, frankly, horrific reality, the Slender Man phenomenon. You probably remember the 2014 case out of Waukesha, Wisconsin. Two 12-year-old girls lured their friend into the woods, stabbed her 19 times, and their motivation. A really disturbing belief in this character, Slender Man. Incredibly, the victim survived, but the crime itself just sent shockwaves everywhere. Our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the most vital insights from the sources we've looked at, basically giving you a shortcut to truly understanding this modern myth. We're going to unpack how a fictional character, something born from a digital contest, could evolve into something that so profoundly impacts real lives.
It's truly fascinating, isn't it? How something that's, clearly made up, well, almost absurd if you think about it, could lead to such devastating real-world consequences. So yeah, we're going to trace Slender Man's origins, which are actually quite surprising. We'll explore how he blew up into this pop culture icon and ultimately dig into how those lines between fiction and reality just got tragically blurred.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to go right back to the beginning. How exactly did this faceless, tall figure in a black suit become such a huge thing? What's really surprising, like you said, is that Slender Man wasn't some ancient folklore, passed down for ages. He was born very recently, June 10, 2009, on an internet forum called Something Awful. It was part of a Photoshop contest, believe it or not. The challenge was to create paranormal images.
That's exactly right. And the key contribution came from a user called Victor Surge. His real name is Eric Knudsen. He posted these two black and white photos. They look kind of old. One showed kids playing, another just gathered around, but he'd subtly photoshopped this tall, thin, kind of spectral figure into the background. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just the images. He added text. These really eerie, fabricated snippets, supposedly from witnesses, talking about child abductions and giving the character the name the Slender Man. Like, under one photo, there was this chilling line, supposedly from a photographer who vanished. We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, and another quote mentioned 14 kids disappearing before a library fire. It's those text additions that really turned simple pictures into, like, the seed for this whole myth.
That's incredible. So it wasn't just a spooky picture and immediately had this implied story. What was Knudsen actually aiming for, do you think? What made it stick?
Well, Knudsen himself said his intention was, and I'm quoting here, to formulate something whose motivations can barely be comprehended and which caused unease and terror in a general population. He was pulling from all over the place, loads of unsettling stories and media, stuff like Stephen King's The Mist, reports of shadow people, Mothman, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon, even the tall man from the movie Phantasm.
Okay, so a real mix.
Oh yeah, and H.P. Lovecraft, William S. Burroughs, survival horror games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. It was a deliberate mix of the familiar and the totally alien. Even his name, Victor Surge, is apparently a little nod to a DC Comics character, The Question, whose name is Victor Sage, shows you the breadth of influences.
Right, it taps into that collective unease, doesn't it?
Exactly. Fertile ground for new monsters.
So let's get into the creature itself. What does Slender Man actually look like? What can he supposedly do?
Well, his core look is pretty consistent, even though details shift, because there's no single, official version. He's almost always shown as unnaturally tall, super thin humanoid shape. And that blank, featureless white head and face is key. Chilling. Though some stories say his face can look different depending on who's seeing him. Always in a dark suit and tie, though. Very formal, weirdly.
And the arms. I remember something about the arms.
Ah, yes. The long, sometimes tentacle-like arms or appendages, they supposedly sprout from his back or sides. He can stretch them out to intimidate people or, grab his victims. Some stories even say he can be, 14 feet tall.
Okay, seriously unsettling. And where does he hang out? What happens if you encounter him?
He's often linked to forests, woods, abandoned places, sort of liminal spaces on the edge of things. And his powers tap into modern fears, really. Teleportation, just appearing and disappearing. And he messes with technology cameras. Video recorders start glitching or malfunctioning when he's near.
Right, the static on the screen thing.
Exactly. But the really insidious part is the slender sickness.
Slender sick.
Yeah, it's this idea that just being near him makes you sick. Triggers intense paranoia, horrible nightmares, delusions. Often comes with nosebleeds, too. And he usually goes after children or young adults. The idea is their minds are easier to manipulate.
And investigating him draws his attention. That's classic folklore stuff.
Totally. Don't look too close, or the monster will notice you Adds another layer of dread.
Okay, so it starts with this one forum post, these images, this text. How did it just explode globally so fast? How does a creepypasta, which is basically just text you, copy and paste, get so big?
It really speaks to the power of collaborative online creation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Slender Man just went viral. It sparked tons of fan art, people dressing up as him for cosplay, and of course, endless online stories. The creepypastas. And creepypastas are perfect for this, right? They're short, easy to share horror stories. They jump from site to site because there was no single owner, no official canon. Tons of different authors just started writing Slender Man stories. Everyone added their own little bit to the mythos.
So it grew organically.
Completely. Pretty early on, other people on the forum started adding bits, like creating fake historical lore. Someone using the name Throw Up invented this 16th century German figure called Der Grossmann, implying he was an early version of Slender Man. That stuff just added to the mystery.
Okay, so beyond the stories and the art, what were the big things that really pushed Slender Man into the, mainstream consciousness?
Video games were absolutely huge for his spread. Massive. In 2012, this indie game came out, Slender. The 8 pages. Super simple concept, but terrifying. It became an instant phenomenon. Its website actually crashed because too many people were trying to download it. Like 2 million downloads in the first month.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then a more polished sequel, Slender. The Arrival came out in 2013, but maybe even more influential was the Marble Hornets web series.
Ah, yes, the found footage YouTube thing.
Exactly. Ran from 2009 to 2014, started right out of that original Something Awful thread. Marble Hornets introduced some key ideas that became really common in the lore, like proxies. These are humans acting under Slender Man's influence, and that crossed circle symbol that became associated with him.
That series was massive, wasn't it?
Incredibly popular. By 2013, it had over 250,000 subscribers, 55 million views. Huge numbers for the time. And it inspired a whole wave of similar found footage horror series online, like Everyman H. Hybrid and Tribe 12. It showed how a story could just jump platforms and keep growing.
Which brings us back, unfortunately, to where we started. That chilling 2014 stabbing case in Waukesha. Let's really unpack that, because it's just such a stark example of this blur between internet fiction and, real-world violence.
Yeah, it's crucial to understand the whole phenomenon. May 31st, 2014, Waukesha, Wisconsin. 2 12-year-old girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weir, lured their friend, Peyton Leutner, also 12, into the woods in a local park. They stabbed her 19 times.
19 times. It's just hard to comprehend.
It really is. And their motive, which came out during the investigation, was just chillingly tied to the myth. They told police they did it to appease Slender Man, to prove to him that they were worthy, that he was real. They were afraid he'd harm their families if they didn't do it, and they believed he'd reward them by letting them live in his slender mansion in the forest.
The Slender Mansion.
Yeah. And Peyton's survival was just miraculous. One of the stab wounds missed a major artery by less than a millimeter. She managed to crawl out of the woods to a road where a cyclist found her and got help. Incredible resilience.
The psychological side of this, how do you even begin to understand what was going on in their heads? 2 12-year-olds.
It's incredibly complex and disturbing. The investigation shed some light, though. Morgan Geyser was later diagnosed with early-onset childhood schizophrenia. During interrogations, she reportedly showed very little empathy. She also talked about having lifelong hallucinations, both seeing and hearing things, seeing figures, she called it, talking to fictional characters like Slender Man, Snape, Voldemort, even one of the Ninja Turtles.
Wow, so there were clearly underlying issues there.
Absolutely. And Anissa Weir, while she did express some guilt, she also seemed to genuinely believe the attack was necessary, that they had to do it to protect their families from Slender Man. It really highlights how this online myth could tragically intersect with, and perhaps amplify, pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities.
And they were tried as adults, right, despite being so young.
Yes, due to Wisconsin state law regarding the severity and premeditated nature of the crime, they were charged and tried in adult court. Weir was eventually sentenced to 25 years to life in a state mental hospital. She was actually granted conditional release in 2021. Geyser received a sentence of 40 years to life, also in a mental health facility. Her release is anticipated sometime in 2025, I believe.
This whole horrific event, understandably, kicked off a huge moral panic, didn't it? What was the reaction like from the media, the public? Were there other incidents linked to Slender Man?
Oh, definitely. There was a widespread moral panic across the U.S. The Waukesha police chief, Russell Jack, made a statement that got picked up everywhere. He warned parents that the incident should be a wake-up call because the internet is full of dark and wicked things.
Yeah, I remember that. A lot of fear about the internet's dark corners.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Waukesha. The Slender Man belief got linked, rightly or wrongly, to other disturbing incidents. There was a report of a 13-year-old girl in Ohio attacking her mother with a knife, apparently wearing a mask. A 14-year-old in Florida allegedly set her house on fire with her mother and brother inside after reading about Slender Man. And perhaps most tragically, in early 2015, there was a wave of suicide attempts among young people on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Slender Man was cited as an influence there, sometimes connected to a traditional Lakota suicide spirit.
So it became the symbol for unseen online dangers affecting kids.
Pretty much. It crystallized anxieties about parenting in the digital age, about what kids were encountering online without supervision. It was a really potent, scary symbol for that fear.
Which raises the big question, what does this all mean for how we think about internet culture, how myths spread now, especially when there's potential for real harm?
It's a huge debate, and the stabbing really fueled it. Lots of calls for more parental monitoring, more awareness of what kids are doing online.
Yeah.
But it's tricky, right? Because on the other side, you have experts like Professor Shira Chess, who studies this stuff. She argued that creepypasta sites, for all the scariness, are also valuable spaces for creativity and community building.
Finding that balance.
Exactly. And ironically, the Waukesha stabbing had a massive impact on the Slender Man legend itself. For a lot of fans, the horror became too real. It wasn't fun anymore. That actually led to a decline in his popularity as a purely terrifying figure. And weirdly, it also caused this increase in portrayals of Slender Man as something different, like an anti-hero, maybe even benevolent, protecting victimized kids.
Really? A good Slender Man.
Yeah, folklorists noted that shift.
Yeah.
It seems like a way for the fan base to kind of distance the character they liked from the awful reality of the stabbing, a reaction against the real-world violence.
And then Hollywood tried to cash in, which didn't go over well either, did it?
No, not at all. The 2018 Slender Man movie faced huge controversy before it even came out. Many people felt it was just exploiting the tragedy for profit. Bill Weir, Annissa's father, publicly condemned it, called it absurd, and said it was extending the pain for the families.
I can imagine.
There were petitions against its release. One got nearly 20,000 signatures, calling it crass commercialism. Despite all that, and getting terrible reviews, the film actually made money worldwide, several times its budget. But yeah, it was seen as a critical failure, kind of a nail in the coffin of a dying fandom, as one critic put it.
So this character, born online, really did take on a life of its own, acting almost like traditional folklore. How do scholars see Slender Man fitting into that longer history of storytelling?
That's a really interesting angle. Scholars definitely view Slender Man as a prime example of digital folklore. Professor Shira Chess, who we mentioned, draws direct lines between Slender Man and really ancient fairy folklore.
Like old fairy tales.
Yeah. She points out similarities. They're both otherworldly beings. Their motives are often unclear or vague. Their appearance can shift. They live in wild places like forests, and they're known for abducting children. The parallels are quite striking. And Andrew Peck, another scholar in this area, talks about the collaborative nature. Because Slender Man is so mysterious, people can easily take the basic ideas, the look, the sickness, the proxies, and build new stories. It's like community ownership.
Like campfire stories or urban legends, but online.
Exactly. Continuous adaptation, constant evolution. It shows that even with the internet, that fundamental human need to create and share myths, especially cautionary tales, is still incredibly strong. It just finds new ways to happen.
What's so fascinating is that even when people know he's made up, there's this willingness to engage with him as if he could be real, or at least to get deeply invested. What does Slender Man really symbolize for us today?
That's a great point. Almost everyone involved understands he's fictional, but they suspend disbelief to get into the story, the fear. Symbolically, Shira Chess sees him as a metaphor for things like helplessness, power differentials, and anonymous forces, things we feel powerless against. Andrew Peck connects him more to specific anxieties of the digital age, that feeling of always being connected, but also maybe being watched by unknown third parties, that sort of digital surveillance dread.
That makes sense, the faceless watcher.
Right. And Troy Wagner, the creator of Marble Hornets, he suggested that Slender Man's real power, his terror, comes from being so adaptable. He's a blank slate. People can project onto him whatever scares them the most. So this whole digital legend cycle, mixing stories, pictures, videos, it just keeps evolving. New books, new takes are still coming out. It proves that even a completely fabricated character can tap into really deep human fears and anxieties about the world we live in now.
It really is remarkable how a character from a Photoshop contest became this global icon that seeped into pop culture and, tragically, into real lives. This Slender Man deep dive absolutely highlights the power of collective storytelling, doesn't it? And that really complex, sometimes dangerous interplay between our digital worlds and the physical one. What's the biggest takeaway for you after digging into all this?
For me, it's just that stark reminder of how potent modern myths can be,
Aw.
especially when amplified by the internet. They can entertain, they can build communities, but they can also intersect with reality in profoundly damaging ways. It forces us to think critically about the stories we consume and create online.
A powerful thought to end on. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.